Okay, so picture the scene. It is 1979.
Right.
You are sitting in the faculty lounge at Cambridge University. We're talking about the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics.
Which is, I mean, that is hallowed ground.
Literally hallowed ground. This is the intellectual epicenter where the absolute brightest minds on the planet are, decoding the fundamental building blocks of the universe.
Yeah, the heavy hitters.
Exactly. And sitting across from you is a man who is just at the absolute undeniable peak of his career. He's 48 years old. He holds this spectacularly prestigious position, the chair of mathematical physics.
Right.
He's just been elected as a fellow of the Royal Society, which, for those who don't know, is essentially the scientific equivalent of being knighted.
Oh, yeah, it's as high as it gets.
It is. He's internationally recognized for his work on quantum field theory, subatomic particles, all of it. And he sets his coffee cup down on the table, looks at these colleagues, literally Nobel laureates, and tells them he is quitting.
Just walking away.
Just resigning his professorship,
Yeah.
walking away from the lab forever.
And you can only imagine just the utter silence that must have fallen over that room.
Oh, you could hear a pin drop, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His colleagues were completely, genuinely baffled. To them, he was abandoning the absolute summit of human reason.
Right. I mean, it's like watching the star quarterback of an NFL team, a guy who just won the Super Bowl, unanimous MVP, and he calls a press conference at the absolute prime of his career to say he's retiring to, I don't know, go become a monk in a silent order in the mountains.
That's actually a really good comparison.
You would look at him and think, have you completely lost your mind? Like, why not just do both? Or wait until you retire?
But the thing is, this physicist wasn't having a breakdown.
No.
He was leaving to go to a theological college to train for the Anglican priesthood.
Which is just wild. So today we are taking a deep dive into the life, the mind, and the groundbreaking work of that exact man, John Polkinghorne.
Yes.
Specifically, we are diving into his seminal 1983 book, The Way the World Is.
It is, it's a remarkable piece of literature. And we've got a really rich stack of sources on the desk today to help us unpack it all.
Yeah, we really do.
We're drawing from, thematic analyses of Polkinghorne's entire philosophical framework. We have detailed biographical accounts of his time as an elite physicist to really ground us in his scientific chops.
Which is so important.
Absolutely. We're also looking at historical critiques from both secular materialists who thought he was, crazy, and theologians who thought he was maybe a bit too unorthodox. And quite importantly, we have a collection of devotional reflections based directly on his writings.
And I really want to highlight that last source right out of the gate, because our mission for this deep dive is not just to give you, the listener, a dry academic history lesson about a guy who lived in the UK a few decades ago.
No, not at all.
We are exploring a much more profound question. We are looking at how Polkinghorne's incredibly rigorous synthesis of, elite theoretical physics and orthodox Christian theology doesn't just win a formal debate.
Right. It's about so much more than apologetics.
Exactly. It's about how this synthesis actually inspires the believer to love Christ more deeply. The goal here is to equip you to live for him more fully in your daily life by bringing your whole mind to your faith.
Which is something we desperately need today.
Because there is this pervasive cultural narrative out there, whether you're sitting in a high-level university science class or, a corporate boardroom, that to be a rational, modern person, you have to sort of quietly hide the fact that you believe in a resurrected Savior.
Yeah, you check your brain at the church door and you check your faith at the lab door.
Right. It's a profound tension, and it forces this completely false binary. You're told you must either be a rigorous thinker who demands empirical evidence, or you're a person of faith who relies on comforting fairy tales.
And Polkinghorne is just the ultimate case study in why that binary is entirely fabricated.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand his arguments, we have to understand his credentials. We can't just brush past the science.
No, we definitely can't.
When we say he was a world-class physicist, we aren't talking about, a high school chemistry teacher who liked reading C.S. Lewis on the weekends.
Not even close.
Yeah.
We need to put some serious weight behind his resume. So John Polkinghorne was born in 1930. He went to Trinity College, Cambridge.
Which is the intellectual home of Isaac Newton.
Exactly. Newton's turf. He got his Ph.D. in 1955 under a man named Abdus Salam.
Wait, I recognize that name. Salam won the Nobel Prize, didn't he?
He did, yeah. Salam won the Nobel in physics for his work on the electroweak unification theory, which, without getting too bogged down on the math, was a massive leap forward in showing how different fundamental forces in the universe are actually connected.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So Polkinghorne is cutting his teeth under an absolute giant. After his PhD, he goes to the California Institute of Technology for his postdoctoral research. And there he works under Murray Gell-Mann.
Hold on, Gell-Mann, is he the guy who came up with the quark?
Yes, Murray Gell-Mann won the Nobel Prize for essentially discovering the fundamental building blocks of matter.
That is insane.
Right. Before him, we thought protons and neutrons were the smallest things in the universe. But Gell-Mann theorized that protons were actually made up of even smaller, bizarre particles that he playfully named quarks.
I love that name.
Yeah, it's great. And Polkinghorne was right there, working alongside the absolute titans of 20th century physics during the golden age of particle discovery.
Okay, so he is swimming in the deepest possible intellectual waters here. He eventually goes back to Cambridge, right?
Yes, he ascends rapidly through the academic ranks. By 1968, he's appointed to that tremendously prestigious chair of mathematical physics at Cambridge.
Wow.
He leads the theoretical physics group in the Department of Applied Mathematics. And his day job involved things that honestly sound like science fiction to the rest of us.
Like what?
Well, he was researching quantum field theory, resonant states, modeling the strong nuclear force, and engaging in deep inelastic scattering.
Okay, stop right there. Deep inelastic scattering. What on earth is that? Because if I'm going to appreciate his theology later, I feel like I need to know what he was actually doing in the lab from 9 to 5.
It's a great question, actually, because it reveals a lot about how he thought about truth. So the deep inelastic scattering was the method scientists use to prove that quarks actually existed.
Okay.
Think about it. You can't just put a proton under a microscope to see what's inside it. It's way too small. Light waves are too big to resolve it. So what do?
I have no idea.
You build a massive, miles-long particle accelerator. You take electrons, speed them up to almost the speed of light, and you smash them violently into protons.
Okay, so it's like firing a sniper rifle into a bowling ball.
Close, but more like firing a high-speed bullet into a cloud of smoke.
Oh, okay.
Because if the proton was just a soft, uniform cloud of energy, the electron would just pass straight through, right? Maybe deflecting a tiny bit.
Right, that makes sense.
But what Polkinghorne and his colleagues observed was that occasionally, the electrons would hit something hard inside the proton and violently bounce off at sharp angles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it proved there were hard, point-like structures hiding deep inside the proton. The scattering was deep because it probed the interior, and inelastic because the collision literally shattered the proton.
Just creating all this subatomic shrapnel.
Exactly, absorbing kinetic energy to create new particles. And Polkinghorne was doing the intense mathematics to explain exactly how and why these subatomic shrapnel patterns behaved the way they did.
That is incredible. He is literally writing the mathematical language to describe the invisible architecture of reality.
It is.
And he was so good at it that he gets elected to the Royal Society in 1974.
Recognizing undeniable, monumental contributions to human knowledge. He is at the absolute apex of the scientific world.
And then, 5 years later, the Cambridge faculty lounge scene happens. He resigns to become a priest. So, why? I mean, the sources mention that his book, The Way the World Is, was essentially born from him trying to explain this decision to his colleagues over coffee in the laboratory canteen.
That's right.
But did he just get tired of math? Was it a midlife crisis? What was his reason?
What's fascinating here is that his colleagues asked him exactly that. They'd sit across from him, sipping terrible break room coffee, and say, "John, have you abandoned reason? Have you given up on the truth?"
What did he say?
His answer was essentially, "No, I am leaving to pursue a larger truth."
I don't think I follow. If you are literally discovering quarks, how does the truth get any larger or more foundational than that?
Well, Polkinghorne explained that science is brilliant, unparalleled, really at answering how questions.
Okay.
How do quarks interact? How does a star collapse? How does deep inelastic scattering work? Science provides the mechanisms.
Right.
But he realized over time that science is completely silent, inherently incapable of answering foundational why questions. Why is there a universe at all instead of just nothing?
Oh, I see.
Why does the universe obey rational mathematical laws? What is the purpose of human existence? What is the objective basis for love or moral value?
Because science operates on physical reductionism, right? It breaks things down.
Exactly.
Like if you ask a strictly materialist scientist, what is love? They have to say, oh, it's an evolutionary adaptation characterized by a rush of oxytocin and dopamine in the prefrontal cortex.
Which is true on a mechanical level.
Right, but it feels like it misses the actual point of what love is.
Exactly. Polkinghorne realized he needed a metaphysical framework that went beyond physical reductionism. He didn't leave science because he found it to be false. He left to pursue theology because he found science to be incomplete.
Wow.
It gave him the mechanics of the universe, but it left him starving for the meaning of the universe. He was fundamentally driven by a desire to know the way the world actually is in its totality, not just its atomic structure.
And this is where I want to pause and talk directly to you, the listener, about the implications of this, because what Polkinghorne is arguing here completely reframes how we think about faith.
It really does.
A lot of times, secular culture tells us, and honestly, sometimes we even internalize this, that science is about hard facts and religion is just a comforting psychological blanket we pull over our heads so we don't have to face the cold, dark, meaningless universe.
The old Marxist critique, right?
Yeah.
Religion is the opiate of the masses.
Right. But Polkinghorne is saying the exact opposite. The elite physicist and the orthodox believer are actually in the exact same business, the relentless pursuit of reality.
Yes. The scientist isn't inventing a story to make the math look pretty.
And the believer shouldn't be inventing a comfortable story to make life feel safe. If you're a Christian listening to this challenges you to evaluate your own walk. Are you just seeking a weekly emotional boost, or are you aggressively seeking what is fundamentally real?
That is the core question.
Polkinghorne's life suggests that the gospel isn't meant to be just a nice thought. It's a true account of reality under the hand of its maker. If God is real, he is the author of physics. He can handle your intellect. You don't need to fear exploring the natural world.
And that leads us to the core epistemological problem Polkinghorne had to solve.
Right.
Epistemology being, of course, the study of how we know what we know.
Right.
Because if science and faith are both pursuing reality, how do they actually interact? Historically, they either go to war or people just build a brick wall between them in their minds.
The classic compartmentalization. You've got your Tuesday morning Excel spreadsheet brain where everything has to be logical and data-driven.
Right.
And then you have your Sunday morning worship brain where you sing songs and talk about miracles, and you just make sure the two sides of your brain never, ever talk to each other so they don't fight.
Precisely. And Polkinghorne rejected that completely. He developed a philosophical framework that he called critical realism to allow the two disciplines to communicate.
Okay, critical realism sounds like an oxymoron to me. If something is real, why do I need to be critical about it?
It's a very specific philosophical term. Let's break it in half. The realism part is the absolute conviction that there is an actual objective reality out there that exists entirely independently of the human mind.
Okay.
The universe isn't a simulation, it isn't a social construct, and it doesn't disappear when we close our eyes. Both the scientist and the theologian are trying to describe something that actually exists.
Okay, that makes sense. A rock is a rock whether I believe in it or not.
Right. But it is critical realism because it acknowledges that our human access to that objective reality is never direct and never perfect.
Oh, because our senses are flawed.
Exactly. Our understanding is always filtered. It's mediated through our limited senses, our imperfect scientific models, our cultural contexts, and our personal biases. We do not possess a flawless, unfiltered God's eye view of the universe.
So it's a middle ground. It's pushing back against two extremes. Because on one side, you have what? Naive positivism? The people who say science is the only objective truth. If I can't put it in a beaker, weigh it on a scale, or measure it with a laser, it doesn't exist. All religious or emotional experiences are just subjective chemical illusions.
Yes. Critical realism rejects the arrogance of scientism completely. But on the other extreme, it also flatly rejects sheer relativism.
Oh, the postmodern stuff.
Right. That's the ideology that says because our lenses are flawed, there is no objective truth at all. All scientific theories and all religious doctrines are just constructed narratives used for power.
Your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth.
Exactly.
Man, that is everywhere today. Live your truth. But critical realism says, no, there is only the truth. And even though our scientific tools and our theological words might be slightly clumsy, they are still genuinely pointing toward that one real independent reality.
You nailed it. And to make this practical, Polkinghorne coined a beautiful phrase. He called it two-eyed vision.
Two-eyed vision.
Yeah. He wrote, I view the world through the eye of science and through the eye of religion. And I think with that two-eyed vision, I can see further and deeper than I could with either eye on its own.
I really like that. It reminds me of those old 3D glasses you'd get at the movie theater.
Oh, right.
If you close your left eye and just look through the right lens, you can still see the movie. You can follow the plot, you see the actors, but the picture is flat. It's strictly two-dimensional.
Right.
If you switch eyes, you get a slightly different flat picture. But the moment you open both eyes and look through both lenses simultaneously, your brain combines the images. Suddenly, the picture has depth. It pops off the screen.
That's a perfect analogy. You perceive the spatial reality that the director actually intended.
You see the whole picture. But wait, doesn't one eye eventually dominate the other? In practice, doesn't the rigorous, mathematically proven data of the scientific eye naturally overpower the softer, more subjective religious eye?
That is the assumption most people make. And honestly, it's why so many scientists become atheists. But Polkinghorne argues that this happens because people misunderstand the different jobs the two eyes are doing.
How so?
To explain this, he introduces the threefold map of human knowing. He says reality is too complex for just one method of investigation. There are three distinct modes of engaging with the world: the scientific encounter, the personal encounter, and the religious encounter.
Okay, walk me through the map. What does the scientific encounter look like?
The scientific encounter deals exclusively with the impersonal physical world. It investigates mechanisms, forces, and quantities.
Okay.
But here is the crucial part. To do this effectively, science has to intentionally filter out personal qualities. It has to be detached, objective, and repeatable. It deliberately restricts its own field of vision so it can measure things accurately.
That makes total sense. Like if you're a chemist measuring the boiling point of water in a lab in London and another chemist is doing it in Tokyo, it doesn't matter if one of you is deeply in love and the other is going through a terrible divorce.
Exactly. The water boils at 100 degrees Celsius regardless of human emotion.
Right. The scientific method demands that you remove the person from the experiment.
Yes. But then we move to the second mode, the personal encounter. This is how we come to know other human minds.
Okay.
You cannot understand your spouse, your children, or your best friend using the scientific method. If you sit down at dinner and treat your spouse merely as a predictable mechanical biological system governed by chemical inputs.
That's going to be a very short dinner.
Yeah, you cease treating them as a person. Personal knowing cannot be detached. It requires trust, vulnerability, empathy, and active engagement. You can't subject a human relationship to a repeatable laboratory experiment without destroying the relationship itself.
Wow, okay. So science maps the objects. Personal encounter maps the subjects. Where does the religious encounter fit in? Is that just a bigger version of the personal?
Essentially, yes.
Hmm.
The religious encounter extends the logic of personal knowing toward its ultimate object,
Oh.
God.
Ah, I see.
Polkinghorne argues that treating God like a chemical compound, demanding that he behave like a repeatable experiment that we can summon on command to prove his existence, is what philosophers call a category error.
A category error, like trying to figure out how much the color blue weighs, or trying to measure the concept of justice with a yardstick.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You are using the completely wrong tool for the dimension of reality you're trying to interact with.
Right.
You assess a scientific claim by laboratory criteria, reproducibility, mathematical elegance, empirical observation. But you assess a religious or personal claim by analogous criteria appropriate to its subject: historical fruitfulness, philosophical coherence, and its correspondence to the deepest levels of human experience.
Science intentionally filters out meaning so it can discover mechanism. Religion steps in to provide the overarching meaning that science was forced to leave on the cutting room floor.
What I love about this is how freeing it is for the listener's daily life.
Yeah.
Think about your week. God gave you two eyes.
Yeah.
When you are sitting at your desk on a Wednesday morning, using the eye of science and reason to build a complex financial model, or code a piece of software, or diagnose a patient's illness, you are looking at the intricate, reliable mechanisms of God's world.
And you can praise God for that order.
Exactly. You don't have to feel like your secular job is somehow unspiritual. And then when you are comforting a grieving friend or taking communion on Sunday, you are using the eye of religion to experience the personal grace of the Creator. It's the same universe.
Yes.
Loving Christ deeply means refusing to fear the truth found in nature. The God who wrote the book of nature is the exact same God who wrote the book of Scripture.
Yeah.
They cannot ultimately contradict. And that framework is vital because it leads us to the next massive question Polkinghorne tackled. We've established how we should look at the world with this critically realistic two-eyed vision.
Right.
The obvious next step is to ask, when a world-class physicist puts on those glasses and looks at the deep structure of the cosmos, what does he actually see? Does the physical universe look like a random accident, or does it look like it has a maker?
Well, based on his book, what he sees is a universe that is shockingly, almost suspiciously rational. He focuses heavily on this idea of intelligibility.
Yes, intelligibility.
And I have to admit, this is something I had never really thought about until reading these sources. We just take it for granted that the universe makes sense.
It is the most profoundly overlooked miracle of our existence. Polkinghorne points out the staggering intelligibility of the universe. Why is the physical world so remarkably, beautifully transparent to human mathematical reasoning?
Wait, unpack that for me, because a skeptic would just say, well, obviously we can understand the universe, we live in it, what's the mystery?
The mystery is the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. Think about what theoretical physics actually entails. A scientist like Dirac or Einstein sits at a desk with a piece of paper and a pencil.
Right.
They aren't looking through a telescope. They are just following the abstract internal logic of pure mathematics in their own minds. They scribble down highly complex equations because the math feels elegant or beautiful.
Okay.
Then, decades later, experimental physicists build a multi-billion-dollar particle accelerator, smash atoms together, and discover that the physical, material universe out there in the dark void actually obeys the exact equations that a primate dreamed up on a piece of paper.
That is wild. Why should the cold, hard, unthinking matter of a star exploding 10 billion light years away care about the abstract geometry going on inside a human brain on a tiny blue planet?
Exactly. There is no inherent reason why human math should perfectly map onto cosmic reality.
Wow.
Albert Einstein famously said, "The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible." And Polkinghorne takes this profound mystery of intelligibility and pairs it with what physicists call fine-tuning and the anthropic principle.
Okay, let's get into fine-tuning. This is the idea that the universe seems like it was incredibly dialed in right from the Big Bang to allow for complex life to exist, right?
Yes. Over the latter half of the 20th century, physics discovered that there are certain fundamental constants woven into the fabric of the universe. The strength of gravity, the electromagnetic force, the strong and weak nuclear forces, the mass of electrons.
Okay.
These aren't things that slowly evolved. These numbers were locked in at the exact moment of the Big Bang. And if any of these dials were turned even a microscopic fraction of a hair in either direction, the universe would be completely sterile. No stars, no planets, no carbon, and absolutely no life.
The sources mention one specific example that just, honestly, it broke my brain. The cosmological constant. Can you explain what that is and just how finely tuned it is?
I will try, though the numbers truly defy human imagination.
Let's hear it.
The cosmological constant relates to the energy density of the vacuum of space. It's essentially the anti-gravity force that is driving the expansion of the universe.
Okay.
Physicists have calculated that for our universe to exist in its current life-permitting state, the cosmological constant had to be fine-tuned to an accuracy of approximately 1 part in 10 to the power of 120, measured in Planck units.
I need to stop you there because I want the listener to actually feel the weight of that number. 10 to the power of 120. That is a 1 followed by 120 zeros.
It's incomprehensible.
To put that in perspective, there are only about 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the entire observable universe. So this level of precision is functionally impossible to wrap your head around.
Right.
If it were slightly higher, space would have expanded so violently and so quickly that matter could never have clumped together to form galaxies, stars, or planets. And if it were slightly lower, the gravity of the universe would have overpowered the expansion, and the entire cosmos would have collapsed back in on itself in a fiery crunch almost immediately. So the dial had to be set perfectly. It's like standing on the edge of the observable universe, throwing a dart across billions of light years, and hitting a bullseye the size of a single subatomic particle.
That is a very apt analogy. And that is just one constant. There are dozens of them, all stacked on top of each other.
It's absurd.
Sir Fred Hoyle, an eminent astronomer who was actually an atheist for much of his life, looked at the fine-tuning of carbon resonance and famously said, "A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect has monkeyed with physics."
Wow.
To Polkinghorne, the fine-tuning of the universe screams of teleology of purpose and design.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because I can hear the skeptic listening to this right now. A skeptic could easily say, look, sure, it's a crazy cosmic coincidence, but it's just a happy accident.
Yeah, the weak anthropic principle.
Right. After all, if the universe wasn't fine-tuned for life, We wouldn't be here to observe it, so the only kind of universe we could ever find ourselves in is one that looks fine-tuned.
Exactly.
Or what about the multiverse theory? That's huge in pop culture right now. The idea that our universe isn't the only one. There's a giant cosmic bubble bath generating infinite universes, all with randomly shuffled laws of physics.
Right.
Most of them are dead, but if you roll the infinite dice enough times, eventually you'll get a universe perfectly tuned for life. We just happen to live in the lucky lottery-winning universe.
What's fascinating here is how Polkinghorne, speaking not as a pastor but as an elite theoretical physicist, systematically dismantled the multiverse objection. He pointed out that the multiverse is not a scientific theory. It is a piece of untestable speculative metaphysics.
Wait, really? But scientists talk about it all the time on documentaries.
They do, but it is mathematically impossible to empirically observe or measure a universe outside of our own.
Yeah.
We have zero data for it.
Oh, because it's outside our universe.
Exactly. Polkinghorne argued that the multiverse is an immense assumption made, quite often, specifically to evade the terrifying implications of purpose that fine-tuning demands.
Interesting.
In science, there is a principle called Occam's razor, or parsimony. It states that the simplest explanation that accounts for all the evidence is usually the correct one. Polkinghorne argued that it is vastly more rational, more elegant, and more intellectually satisfying to believe in one universe created by a singular, purposeful mind than it is to invent an infinite number of completely unobservable universes just to avoid the concept of a creator.
Okay, that makes sense for the multiverse, but what about the intelligibility part? The skeptic might push back on our mathematical ability and say, we only understand the universe because our brains evolved in it. Our logic is just a biological survival trait.
Well, Polkinghorne anticipated that too. He agreed that evolutionary biology perfectly explains why human beings develop the brain capacity to figure out the trajectory of a thrown spear, or how to outsmart a predator in the savannah. But he noted that you absolutely do not need an intuitive grasp of quantum field theory or the mathematics of 11-dimensional string theory to escape a saber-toothed tiger.
Right. Cavemen didn't need to know the mass of the Higgs boson to find berries.
Exactly. The human capacity for abstract, transcendent reason, our ability to map the deep, invisible architecture of the cosmos, far outstrips any basic evolutionary survival requirement. It points to a deeper reality.
So what is his explanation? If it's not a biological accident and it's not a multiverse lottery, why does human math perfectly fit the cosmic machine?
Polkinghorne points directly to the intersection of ancient scripture and modern physics, specifically Genesis 1 and the opening of the Gospel of John.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Genesis 1.2627 says, humanity was created in the image and likeness of God. The Hebrew terms there are selim for image and demuth for likeness.
Right.
Theologians have long understood this isn't talking about physical resemblance. God doesn't have two arms and a nose. It is talking about a spiritual and rational resonance. We share a sliver of the divine capacity for reason.
That makes sense.
And then John 1.1 famously says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
The Greek term for word there is logos, right? Which is a massive concept.
Yes, logos. To the ancient Greek philosophical mind, the logos wasn't just the spoken sound, it was the rational principle, the animating logic, the deep structuring reason behind all of reality.
Wow.
And the Apostle John boldly claims that this cosmic logos is actually a person, Jesus Christ. So putting it all together, the physical universe makes mathematical sense because it was spoken into existence by the divine logos. It has a rational foundation.
And human minds can comprehend that universe because we bear the solemn and demuth, the image of that exact same creator.
Exactly. There is a designed, intentional correspondence between the human mind and the cosmos.
I want the listener to just sit with that for a second. Think about your own intellectual life. Think about the mundane things you might have done today. Maybe you solved a logistical bottleneck at your supply chain job. Maybe you're a mechanic diagnosing an engine issue. Maybe you're a college student trying to understand a dense textbook.
Yeah.
Your capacity to reason, to see order in chaos, to solve problems, that is not a biological accident. It is a direct reflection of the image of God stamped onto your very being. Your mind is a divine gift.
It truly is.
And what that means is that using your mind, stretching your intellect, being curious about how the world works is actually a sacred stewardship. It is an act of worship. When a biologist studies the intricacies of a cell or when you balance your family's budget, you are inadvertently tracing the brushstrokes of the logos. It completely elevates your daily grind into a profound spiritual exercise.
It does. It sacralizes human reason.
Hmm.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this beautiful, mathematically ordered universe raises a massive, potentially devastating theological question.
Well, that's it.
Well, if the universe is perfectly ordered by the divine logos, and the math is this flawlessly precise, does that mean the universe is just a giant, rigid, locked machine? Is everything just predetermined clockwork?
Oh, I see where you're going. Because if reality is just a rigid machine, where does human free will come in? And more importantly for the believer, where does God's daily involvement in our lives fit?
Exactly.
Because honestly, nobody wants to pray to a cosmic watchmaker who wound up the universe 14 billion years ago, set all the dials perfectly, and then just walked away to let it tick down.
Hmm.
We want to know if God is active now. Does prayer actually do anything?
Yes.
And this is where Polkinghorne's background in quantum physics completely revolutionizes our understanding of God's providence.
Good.
To understand this, we really have to talk about the historical shift from the Newtonian universe to the quantum universe.
This is perhaps Polkinghorne's most significant contribution. For a couple of centuries, following the brilliance of Sir Isaac Newton, the absolute scientific consensus was strictly deterministic.
Yeah.
The Newtonian universe was seen as a giant, incredibly complex clockwork mechanism. The belief was that if you had a supercomputer powerful enough, and you knew the exact position and momentum of every single particle in the universe at any given moment, you could theoretically calculate exactly what was going to happen for the rest of eternity. Everything was fixed. Cause and effect were locked in tight.
Which leaves absolutely zero room for a God who answers prayer. If the future is perfectly locked in by the physics of the past, then God can't intervene unless he constantly breaks his own laws of physics to perform a miracle. He has to act like an intruder in his own house.
Exactly. It forces God into the role of a mechanic who has to keep jamming a wrench into the gears to fix things. But then the 20th century happens. Science probes deeper. We discover quantum mechanics and, a few decades later, chaos theory.
And everything changes.
Everything. It turns out that at the subatomic level, reality does not behave like predictable billiard balls bouncing off each other. In 1927, Werner Heisenberg introduced the uncertainty principle.
Explain the uncertainty principle for us. How does it break the clockwork?
Heisenberg mathematically proved that you literally cannot know both the exact position and the exact momentum of a quantum particle at the same time. The more precisely you measure where an electron is, the less you know about where it's going, and vice versa.
That's so weird.
It is. And this isn't just a problem with our measuring instruments being clumsy. It is a fundamental property of matter itself. At its foundational subatomic level, the physical world has built-in probabilistic behavior. It is inherently fuzzy. It is not strictly determined.
So the bedrock of the universe isn't solid stone, it's a sea of shifting probabilities. And then chaos theory amplifies this from the microscopic to the macroscopic, right? The famous butterfly effect.
Yes. In the 1960s, a meteorologist named Edward Lorenz was running early computer models of weather patterns. The story goes that he wanted to rerun a sequence to save time, so he typed in the starting numbers from a previous printout. But the computer was storing the numbers to 6 decimal places, like 0.506127. And the paper printout only showed 3 decimal places, 0.506. Lorenz typed in the shorter number, assuming a difference of 1 part in 1,000 wouldn't matter.
Just a tiny rounding error.
Right. But when he came back hours later, the simulated weather pattern hadn't just changed slightly. It had produced a completely different global weather system.
Wow.
He discovered that nonlinear dynamical systems like weather or fluid dynamics or the stock market are exquisitely sensitive to initial conditions. A microscopic change at the beginning cascades into massive, unpredictable macro effects.
Hence the phrase, the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil sets off a tornado in Texas weeks later.
Precisely. So what Polkinghorne realized as a physicist is that quantum indeterminacy and chaos theory decisively, empirically defeat the idea of a clockwork universe.
Oh, I see.
They defeat metaphysical naturalism. The universe is not a closed, strict, bottom-up reductionist machine. The physical world has a genuine openness to it. It is a true becoming. The future is not yet written by the past.
Okay, let's bring this back to theology. How does an open universe change how we view God's action?
Because the universe has this built-in openness, this unpredictability at the microscopic quantum level that cascades up into chaotic macroscopic systems, Polkinghorne proposes a compatibilist framework for divine action.
What does that mean?
He argues that God can interact with the world dynamically without ever breaking the laws of physics, because the laws themselves have given them. Polkinghorne calls it God's active information input within the envelope of future possibilities.
Wait, I need to push back here because I can vividly hear the secular materialists listening to this and they are rolling their eyes.
Fair enough.
They'd say this is just the classic God of the gaps argument. 200 years ago, we didn't know what caused lightning, so we said God did it. Now we don't fully understand quantum foam, so you're saying God is hiding down in the subatomic basement pulling levers? As soon as science eventually figures out quantum mechanics, God will be squeezed out of the gap again.
It is a very valid concern, and it is the standard materialist critique. But Polkinghorne explicitly anticipated it, and his defense is brilliant. He clarified that his theory is the exact opposite of a God of the gaps argument.
How so?
A God of the gaps argument points to our ignorance, what we don't know, and inserts God. Polkinghorne is pointing to our knowledge. He is saying that the actual, mathematically proven, empirically discovered laws of physics require an open reality.
Oh.
The indeterminacy of Heisenberg isn't a gap in our knowledge, it's a proven fundamental property of matter. Therefore, God's interaction isn't a violation of nature, it is a non-competitive divine interaction. He isn't hiding in a gap, he is operating the entire open system.
Let me see if I can come up with an analogy for this. Because earlier I used the analogy of a mechanic fixing a clock. If God is a mechanic reaching into a clock, he has to jam the gears and break the laws of physics to change the outcome. He forces the machine.
Right.
But what you're saying is that in a quantum chaotic universe, God is not a mechanic. God is more like a master jazz conductor leading a massive orchestra.
Oh, I like that.
The orchestra has genuine freedom. They are improvising. The music is an open system with real-time becoming. But the conductor is providing constant information input. A subtle gesture here, a change of tempo there, bringing certain instruments up and softening others. He is actively shaping the melody and guiding the improvisation to a beautiful, triumphant climax without ever once stepping off the podium to break a trumpet or physically force a musician to play a note.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Yeah.
God sustains the physical laws, he provides the instruments and the stage, but he engages with creation through its inherent openness. He shapes the music.
That's beautiful.
And this ties deeply into a profound theological concept called kenosis, which is found in Philippians 2, where Paul writes that Christ emptied himself.
Right.
Polkinghorne suggests that in creating an open universe, God engaged in a form of divine kenosis. He voluntarily limited his own absolute overriding microcontrol in order to grant creation genuine freedom. He allowed the universe to be a dynamic, developing story that he interacts with rather than a rigid puppet show that he dictates.
Think about what this means for you listening right now. Think about the heavy anxieties you carry, the stress about your career trajectory, the agonizing choices your kids are making, a sudden financial crisis, or just the terrifying state of global news.
Yeah, there's a lot.
We often oscillate between two false views of God. Either we think he is a deistic spectator sitting a billion light years away, completely detached, just passively watching us struggle, or we think he is a cosmic micromanager who meticulously planned the car crash or the cancer diagnosis to punish us.
Both are terrifying.
Right. But Polkinghorne's framework dismantles both. God is actively, beautifully interacting with your dynamic, developing history. Providence is a real physical possibility. When you pray for healing or for guidance or for a door to open, you aren't just engaging in a psychological self-help exercise.
No, you're literally participating in the open reality of the universe.
Exactly. Inviting the information input of a creator who is capable of guiding outcomes within the envelope of future possibilities. You can trust him with the absolute uncertainties of your life, because physics itself tells us that he designed the universe to operate beautifully within the unpredictable.
It is a profoundly comforting realization.
Yeah.
But as rigorous as this physics-based theology is, we cannot stop at the quantum level. This is where Polkinghorne takes a crucial pivot.
Okay, where does he go?
Because historical Christianity does not just float in the realm of abstract quantum physics or grand philosophical speculation about the cosmos. It hinges on a very specific, gritty, flesh-and-blood historical claim in first-century Judea.
Right. We have to talk about the miracle at the center of it all. We have to talk about the empty tomb. Because it's one thing to say God nudges quantum probabilities in the background. It is a completely different thing to say a dead man's heart started beating again after 3 days. How does a world-class theoretical particle physicist approach a reported bodily resurrection from 2,000 years ago? Does he just say, well, that's where my science stops and my blind faith begins?
Not at all. He approaches the resurrection exactly like a scientist weighing empirical evidence. Polkinghorne was actually very critical of liberal theology that emerged in the 20th century.
What were they saying?
Many liberal theologians, embarrassed by the miraculous, tried to dilute the historical claims of the Bible. They argued that the resurrection was just a spiritual metaphor for the disciples' renewed hope or a symbol of spring returning.
Basically stripping all the actual magic out of it.
Right. But Polkinghorne rejected that. He didn't view the New Testament as a collection of inspiring myths. He treated it as documentary evidence to be rigorously scrutinized. He applied the classic Latin phrase coined by St. Anselm Fides Quaerens intellectum faith seeking understanding.
Which means faith isn't shutting off your brain, it's the starting point for an intellectual investigation.
Exactly. He focuses specifically on the bodily resurrection of Jesus, circa 30 AD. The Greek term used in the New Testament is anastasis.
Anastasis, which literally translates to a standing up again. It is a physical claim.
Yes. Polkinghorne looks at the earliest historical records. He analyzes the Apostle Paul's creed in 1 Corinthians 15, written within just a couple of decades of the event, where Paul specifically names the eyewitnesses and challenges readers to go ask them.
Like a lawyer presenting a case.
Yes. He looks at the 4 gospel accounts of the empty tomb, and he applies a historian's empirical scrutiny to these texts. For example, he points heavily to the fact that all 4 Gospels independently record that women, specifically Mary Magdalene, were the very first people to discover the empty tomb and interact with the risen Christ.
I know there is a massive evidentiary significance to that. Break down why a physicist finds that detail so compelling.
We have to look at the cultural context. In the highly patriarchal first-century Greco-Roman and Jewish world, the testimony of a woman was generally considered unreliable. In many contexts, it wasn't even legally valid in a court of law.
Right.
So imagine you are a group of desperate disciples trying to fabricate a religion. You want to invent a myth to convince the masses that your leader rose from the dead, despite him being publicly executed by the Romans.
If I'm inventing a lie to convince skeptical men in the ancient world, the absolute last thing I would do is make women my primary foundational star witnesses. I would say Peter found the tomb, or John, or a respected Jewish rabbi.
Exactly. It's what historical scholars call the criterion of embarrassment. You do not invent a detail that actively undermines your own apologetic case in the eyes of your target audience.
So it has to be true.
Right. The only conceivable reason the gospel writers would record that women were the first witnesses is if they were bound to the historical facts. They wrote it down that way because it actually, historically, happened exactly like that, embarrassing or not.
That lends immense historical authenticity to the narrative. They aren't writing PR spin, they are writing history. And he also looks at the psychological shift in the disciples, doesn't he?
Yes, the rapid explosive transformation. You have a group of terrified, uneducated fishermen who fled when Jesus was arrested. On Friday, they are cowering in a locked room, terrified of the authorities.
It's just completely broken.
Yeah. And yet, just a few weeks later, these same men are standing publicly in the streets of Jerusalem, boldly proclaiming the resurrection to the very men who crucified Jesus. And nearly all of them went on to be tortured and executed for that singular claim, without ever recanting.
Wow.
Polkinghorne observes that human nature is consistent. People will die for a lie that they mistakenly think is true, but they will absolutely not willingly endure torture and execution for a lie that they themselves invented.
Right, someone would have cracked.
Exactly. Polkinghorne weighs this historical data, the empty tomb, the criterion of embarrassment, the transformed lives of the witnesses, and concludes that the most rational, intellectually parsimonious explanation for the evidence is that the tomb was actually empty, and Jesus actually rose from the dead.
Okay, I follow the historical logic, but I have to ask the obvious physics question. We just spent 20 minutes talking about how God works within the open laws of quantum physics, acting as a conductor who shapes the music without breaking the instruments.
Right.
Isn't a bodily resurrection a blatant, massive, violent breaking of the instruments? How does a physicist square a decaying corpse, regenerating its cells and coming back to life with his scientific worldview?
This is where his synthesis of science and theology reaches its absolute peak. He pushes back against the Enlightenment definition of miracles. People like David Hume define miracles as impossible suspensions of natural law.
Okay.
But Polkinghorne defines miracles completely differently. He calls them unexpected providence in unprecedented circumstances.
Unexpected providence in unprecedented circumstances. I like the sound of that, but what does it actually mean?
It means that God does not arbitrarily violate his own consistency. The resurrection wasn't just a miraculous CPR resuscitation of a normal human body, just so Jesus could live a few more years as a mortal and eventually die again. No, the resurrection was the inauguration of a completely new regime of physics. Polkinghorne calls it transformed corporeality.
Transform corporeality, a new type of physical matter.
Essentially, yes. It is the seed of eschatological renewal. Think of it this way. If God is the ultimate author of the physical laws, and if reality is fundamentally open to his divine action, then God has the sovereign power to introduce a new phase of physical reality, the new creation, right in the middle of the old one.
Wow.
The resurrected body of Jesus could eat fish, it could be touched, but it could also appear in locked rooms. It operated under a new set of redeemed physical laws. The resurrection doesn't violate the physical universe. It reveals the ultimate destiny of the physical universe. It is the prototype of the new creation.
This is so incredibly grounding. If you are listening to this right now, I want you to realize that the historical solidity of the resurrection is meant to be the anchor that steadies you in the most chaotic moments of your ordinary week. When you get that terrifying medical diagnosis, when you get the call that your position at the company has been eliminated, or when you are standing in the freezing rain at the graveside of someone you love desperately, your faith is not just wishful thinking. It isn't a psychological fairy tale you tell yourself to numb the pain.
It's grounded in reality.
Your faith is tethered to a real rock-hewn tomb in the Middle East that is demonstrably historically empty. Let that settled fact be the solid bedrock beneath every single promise Christ has made to you. Because if he conquered the thermodynamics of death in actual space and time, he can certainly handle whatever you are facing on a Tuesday afternoon.
Amen to that. And that profound reality brings us to the final and perhaps most deeply resonant part of Polkinghorne's entire framework. Science helps us understand the staggering mechanisms of the universe. History and empirical evidence help us verify the reality of the empty tomb.
Right.
But why does the empty tomb matter to us on a soul-deep level? This is where we run into the absolute limits of the scientific method and step fully into the breadth of the human experience.
There is a quote from his writings in our source material that is just hauntingly beautiful. I had to read it 3 times. He writes, "Nearly all that makes life worth living slips through the wide meshes of the scientific net."
It is a stunning admission from a man who spent his entire professional life meticulously building and refining that scientific net.
Right?
Science is an incredibly powerful net. It is brilliant at catching certain types of fish. It catches mass, velocity, spin, electromagnetic charge, and atomic weight perfectly. But Polkinghorne is acknowledging that the mesh of the scientific net is fundamentally too wide to catch the things that actually define our daily conscious existence.
What exactly slips through the net? Give me some examples.
Consciousness itself, for one. Philosophers and neuroscientists call it the hard problem of qualia. Science can map the precise neural pathways in your brain that light up when you eat a piece of rich, dark chocolate. They can track the chemical release of serotonin. But science cannot ever explain the subjective experience of what chocolate actually tastes like to you. It cannot explain the internal, undeniable feeling of being a conscious self. It slips through the net.
Wow.
Aesthetic beauty slips through. When you hear a symphony that moves you to tears, science can only measure the acoustic frequency of the sound waves. Moral agency, guilt, and most importantly, love all slip entirely through the scientific net.
But wait, don't strict materialist neuroscientists argue the exact opposite? I feel like I'm constantly reading articles that claim love and morality are nothing but brain chemistry.
I do.
They argue that these things didn't slip through the net, they were just evolutionary illusions. They'll say, you don't actually love your spouse in any transcendent sense. Your brain is just secreting oxytocin to ensure you pair bond long enough to raise viable offspring for the propagation of the species. They reduce everything to biology.
Yes, that is the strict reductionist argument, and it is very loud in our modern culture.
Oh.
But Polkinghorne points out the fatal philosophical flaw in that reasoning, a flaw called scientism.
Scientists.
Right. Scientism is not science. Science is a method of inquiry. Scientism is an arrogant ideological overreach that falsely claims that only what can be measured in a lab is real and everything else is an illusion.
It's like looking at a masterpiece painting, let's say Rembrandt's The Return of the Prodigal Son, which depicts a father embracing his broken, weeping son.
So,
If a chemist looks at that painting, they could say, I have analyzed this canvas. It is exactly 20% lead white pigment, 10% iron oxide, and 70% oxidized linseed oil. Now, that statement is 100% scientifically accurate.
true.
But if the chemist then says, therefore, the painting is nothing but chemicals, and anyone who talks about the themes of forgiveness, heartbreak, and redemption is just making up fairy tales, we would call them a fool.
Exactly.
They have completely ignored the artist's intention. To reduce the painting to its chemistry is to miss the reality of the painting entirely.
That is the perfect illustration of scientism's failure. And this raises a vitally important question for everyone listening. Why do we all possess universal intuitions against gratuitous suffering?
Good question.
If we are truly just random collections of atoms colliding in a meaningless void, why does injustice cause us such deep, visceral outrage? If we are just biological survival machines, why do we feel the crushing, agonizing weight of moral failure when we betray a friend?
Why do we feel guilt if we are just animals reacting to stimuli?
Exactly. Polkinghorne turns to the biblical text here to show how Christianity accounts for all the messy data of human experience that science is forced to ignore. He points to the Apostle Paul's agonized confession in Romans 7.1 times.
Oh, where Paul says, "For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing."
Yes. Every single human being, regardless of their religious background, intimately relates to that verse. We all know the agonizing gap between the person we know we ought to be and the person we actually are when nobody's looking.
Absolutely.
Science has no category for sin. You can't measure it. But human experience absolutely demands a category for it. Polkinghorne looks at the universal reality of human failure, and then he looks at the reality of human suffering, and he points to the prophetic poetry of Isaiah 53.
The suffering servant.
The vision of the suffering servant who bears our pesha, the Hebrew word for our willful transgression and rebellion, and who carries our avon, the deep, twisted iniquity of our nature.
What I find so striking about Polkinghorne's conclusion is that he doesn't just leave all his brilliant physics as abstract trivia. He argues that this exact same God of the quantum foam, the God who engineered the 10 to the 120th power cosmological constant, is the exact same God who steps into the dirt of human history to bear our guilt.
That's the heart of it.
The Christian story, despite its high intellectual cost, and despite the heavy demands it places on our lives, offers the most comprehensive, beautiful account of reality. It doesn't just explain the mechanics of the Big Bang, it explains the deep, aching brokenness in our own hearts, and it provides the only cure.
Polkinghorne realized that any worldview worth holding must speak to our suffering and our guilt, or it simply isn't worth believing. A cold, purely physical universe offers zero comfort for a guilty conscience.
It really doesn't.
But the Christian worldview encompasses both the brilliant mechanisms of nature and the scandalous grace of the cross. It is the only framework wide enough to hold the whole truth.
So, if you are listening to this right now, I want to challenge you based on everything we've uncovered today. Don't compartmentalize your life. Bring your whole uncurated self to Christ.
Yes.
Don't just bring the shiny, put-together Sunday version of yourself. Bring your sharp intellectual doubts. Bring your deep moral failures. Bring the habits you hate. Bring your grief. We often think that hard seasons, unanswered scientific questions, or deep anxieties are evidence against God.
When in reality,
Polkinghorne's life shows us that they are actually the terrain where God's faithfulness is proven. The God who designed the subatomic world and the vast expanse of the cosmos is the same God who bore your Pesha and your Avon on a Roman cross and shattered the thermodynamic power of death forever.
it is, without a doubt, a breathtaking synthesis of human knowledge and divine revelation.
Let's briefly recap this massive journey we've been on today. We started in a Cambridge canteen with an elite theoretical physicist, John Polkinghorne, shocking his colleagues by resigning his prestigious post to become a priest.
Right.
We explored how he learned to view the world with two eyes, through critical realism, refusing to reduce reality to just meaningless molecules, and refusing to reduce faith to blind myth. We saw the divine logos echoing through the miraculous fine-tuning and the sheer mathematical beauty of the cosmos.
And then into quantum physics.
Exactly. We discovered how quantum mechanics and chaos theory decisively defeated the clockwork universe, revealing a genuinely open reality where God's providence and our daily prayers actively, physically participate in the unfolding of history.
Which is incredible.
We weighed the solid historical evidence of the resurrection, anchoring our faith not in wishful thinking, but in the verified reality of an empty tomb. And finally, we saw how the gospel catches everything that slips through the scientific net. Our consciousness, our guilt, our longing for beauty, and our desperate need for grace.
Polkinghorne's life and his brilliant body of work stand as a permanent testament to the fact that while faith cannot be mathematically proven on a chalkboard, it is deeply, beautifully, and profoundly reasonable.
You are invited to investigate Jesus Christ the exact same way a careful, rigorous scientist investigates the universe. With immense patience, with humility, and with absolute unflinching honesty. You do not have to check your brain at the door to follow Jesus. You are invited to bring your entire intellect to the altar.
I couldn't agree more.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to chew on as you go about the rest of your week. Think back to that tension we talked about at the very beginning, that feeling that you have to hide your faith in the boardroom or stay quiet in the university science lab.
Yeah.
If John Polkinghorne is right, if the physical universe is truly this open, and if God is this intimately involved in the quantum background of reality, actively sustaining the very laws of physics moment by moment, what if every single act of intellectual curiosity you have, what if every hard question you ask in the lab, every complex logistical problem you solve at work, every line of code you write, and every quiet moment you spend marveling at how beautifully a flower or a galaxy works is actually the deepest, most authentic form of prayer you could possibly offer to the Creator?
When you view reality through that lens, it changes absolutely everything about how you live your
It
life.
really, truly does. Keep both eyes wide open this week.